It's been a while since we last discussed the Toronto real estate market. As we near the end of 2024, it's clear that the market has faced another challenging year. Coming off one of the worst years in decades, 2023, which recorded historically low sales, 2024 has shown slight improvement in sales volume. However, that's in comparison to a particularly difficult year, making this year still relatively weak overall. I get it, real estate might not seem like the most exciting topic to discuss, but it really depends on your perspective. If you're a seller, it can be a challenging conversation. However, if you're a buyer, this could actually be the perfect opportunity to make your move before any new changes come into play. If you're feeling overwhelmed or unsure about what steps to take, don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a quick call with me using the first link in the description below to share your thoughts and get clarity or whatever is in your mind. Also, if you find this video helpful or simply enjoy watching them, please remember to like and subscribe. It helps YouTube recommend the video to others who might benefit from it. Your support means a lot. What does the second consecutive jumbo rate cut mean? In case you missed it, the Bank of Canada announced another 0.50 basis point rate cut on December 11, the final interest rate announcement for 2024. This marked the second 0.50 basis point cut since October, offering potentially significant relief for many. I don't want to focus only on the positives. It's important to acknowledge that a jumbo rate cut often signals deeper issues with the Canadian economy. In November, 1.5 million people were unemployed, driving the jobless rate to its highest level in nearly 8 years outside the pandemic era. Statistics Canada reported that the unemployment rate rose to 6.8% in November, exceeding expectations and marking a 1.7 percentage point increase since April of 2023. This level was last seen in January 2017, apart from the temporary spikes during 2020 and 2021. Let's be honest, the inflation rate rose 1.6% in October to 2% in November. While it remains within the acceptable target range of 2%, the upward trend is clear. Despite the inflationary pressure, the Bank of Canada proceeded with a jumbo rate cut, bringing the overnight rate down to 3.25%. This decision was largely driven by the struggling Canadian economy and an unfavorable economic outlook. In my opinion, another significant factor is the sharp decline in immigration, which has had a notable impact on the housing market, particularly the condo sector. With an increasing number of condo completions expected this year and the next, the market is facing a surplus of new construction initially planned to accommodate newcomers, plans that no longer align with the current reality. As I mentioned in this video, I want to touch on a few key points and provide you with an overall update as we wrap up 2024 and head into 2025. I won't pretend to have a crystal ball to predict what's coming in 2025, but my goal is to keep you informed about the current market and where the GTA stands as we close out the year. So now let me start off with the sales activity in the GTA. And I have prepared the past 6 years from 2019 up to presently in 2024. And here are all the sales data for the entire year, and I just wanted to give you an overview of what has happened during the entire year. For those that are pretty familiar with this graph, feel free to skip this section and go to the section that you wanted to see. I would describe 2019 is the year prior to pandemic, which was a somewhat normal years for the past 10 to 15 years prior. I will probably use this as a standard for normal year. In 2020, you know pretty much what happened is the pandemic, which we can see sales plummeted quite a bit. In fact, it was the historic low in sales because everybody basically was stuck at home. And that's the pandemic. In 2021, after pandemic restrictions were lifted, the real estate market took off. Sales skyrocketed, and especially for homes in the suburbs. As many companies embrace remote work, this shifted the buyers to prioritize larger spaces outside of Toronto. As a result, home prices, sales volume reached record highs. And at the same time, we see the inflation was through the roof. I believe it was recorded the highest at 8.3%, which is far off from the 2% target from Bank of Canada. So that is the reason why in 2022, the Bank of Canada basically left with no choice but to go aggressively on interest rate hike. And as a result, the purple line, the sales started to trend downward, which you can see in purple. And now during 2023 was recorded one of the worst year in terms of sales for the past decades. And that is in red. And yes, I'm talking about historic low sales for the past decade. And finally, in black is the current year in 2024, and it is actually coming to an end. And we have data right now so far up to November. And let's compare it to the previous year, which I already mentioned. It was the worst year in the past decades. So if we compare the data since January, we have a pretty good beginning during the early part of the year, which we are surpassing the worst year ever in 2023. However, in March, during the springtime, is usually when the sales are the highest, and we are witnessing less sales than the worst year. And that continued through March, April, and May. As a result of the aggressive rate hike, we have seen the inflation number came down to 1.6 in October, which is one of the lowest. And in November, although we have a slight increase to 2%, we were still on the target of 2%. And that is the impact of the interest rate hike that we had during 2022, which now we can in fact determined that the interest rate and really did have the impact on the inflation, and at the same time it tanked the market, and we can witness that through the sales of 2023 and 2024, which has been one of the lowest in years. During the summertime, we can see that the sales were pretty much matching the last year, which wasn't a good sign. And during the September, the fall market, usually it tends to go up. During the past, it always had the highest season during the spring, and the second highest season would be during the fall in September or October. And we did have a better sales in September this year compared to 2023. If we compare the sales in October in 2023, it was 4,646, and in October 2024 we did have a huge increase to 6,658, which is a great sign, from 4,236 November in 2023 to 2024 for 5,875, which has a 40% increase. The media was kind of hyping the market, but at the same time, I will explain why we shouldn't be that excited when we go to the next slide, discuss about the new listing and the active listings. But nevertheless, it is a good sign that it was picking up right now. But don't forget that we are comparing to the worst year in 2023. Before the pandemic, I will consider that as a normal year, and we have sales during the peak closer to 9,000 or 7,000, and even during the summertime it's about 8,000. In 2023 we were talking about almost half of it, which we have resulted one of the lowest in 4,000, when we're reaching the fall market at 4,000 almost each of the month. Basically almost half of the sales we witnessed during the 2019 or 2021 when it was peak. We have as high as 15,600 in March, and we have most of the month over 10,000 sales, and we have a size of 15,000, 13,000, 11,000, 11,000. Even on the lowest month in winter we have 6,000, and also almost 7,000 in January. And that is really a big huge difference compared to 2023 or even this year in 2024. So that gives you an insight of the whole entire year of 2024, and comparing to last year in 2023, how much the interest rate impact the sales activities in the entire GTA. So now let's move on to the second slide, to average prices in GTA. As usual, we have the average prices from 2019 up to 2024, from January to December. In each of every year we see prices trending upward. And just to clarify, this average prices include all home types in the GTA. That includes single detached homes, the semi-detached, the freehold townhouses, condo townhouses, and condos. Let's start with 2019, which is the light blue on the bottom. The average price is about 748,000. And as we move along the year, we see the price always increases, and it tends to increase during the springtime, and then it comes down during the summer, which is the usual pattern, and then pick back up during the fall in September, and it comes down during the winter. So that's the usual year in 2019. And now let's move on to the blue in 2020, which you can see the average price already increased to 800,000. We have a drop off here and then back to 800s during the springtime. But although the pandemic started in 2020, it didn't stop the average price to climb, and we still remain relatively resilient into the 800s during 2020. Came down during the summertime and came back up again during the fall. It pretty much remained in the 800s throughout the year. Now let's go to the 2021, and as expected, it was trending up in the beginning of 2021. Once the pandemic was left off, it reaches as high as 900,000 during the early part of the year and during the spring. And it did have a slight drop off before the spring. However, it did pick up again. It resumes during the summer into the upper 900,000 during 2021. It really didn't slow down at all. The average price remained in high 900 throughout the year. Now the purple line is the 2022, which is the year that inflation was out of control and the average prices broke the record and went above 1 million for the first time. And that was the story of the year in 2022, with high elevated inflation as well. So the Bank of Canada had to decide to do the rate hike to control the inflation. And during May reaches the peak for the past 6 years, which was 1,200,000, and that was the peak so far. The interest rate hiking had the direct impact because it usually has a delay effect, but the price did come down a little bit to 1,100,000 during the summertime. It remained flat during the fall, which usually the prices tend to go higher during the fall, which it didn't happen for the first time in 2022. And it remained resilient, staying just above 1 million. And now carry on to 2023, it still has a slight increase compared to 2022. And remember that 2023 we had the slowest sales in history since 2008. But the price remains high above $1 million. And during the spring, we reaches back to 1.196, which is closer to 1.2, not far off from the peak. The price remained 1,100,000 throughout the summertime. It did fall off during August, but it came back up to almost 1,100,000 again during the fall, and that was in the slowest sales year. Here, it can demonstrate how the buyers and sellers are really not budging in. The price remained quite resilient. However, that definitely impacted the sales. That's the reason why we had the slowest sales activities. Mainly, the buyers and the sellers just couldn't meet. So there are buyers that wanted to buy at a lower price, but the sellers simply don't want to sell. That is a simple formula where sales activity wasn't moving. So lastly, let's take a look at average prices in 2024, which remain pretty much aligned to last year in 2023. It remains into 1,100,000, and throughout it didn't go as high as 1.2. It remained really flat. During the summer, it did have a drop off and closer to 1 million. And again, right now, September, October, and the average prices did have a slight increase, but pretty much stay flat. So now that we have more rate cuts happening during this year, we can see during the fall, we have a slight improvement in terms of sales, but the average prices really didn't drop off that much. So here's the slide for the new listing, sold, and active listings. As you can see, the blue represents the new listings, and red the sold properties, and in black are the active listings. So we have data from November 2023 up to November of 2024 as of recording of this video. So let's take a look at the active listings since November 23, which was quite high at 16,759. And then in December, it came down just a bit to 10,370, which is quite normal during the holiday season. People usually tend to take it off and hoping to relist it maybe in the next coming spring market, which is one of the hottest season for real estate. So the year started off with more or less about 10,000, which is quite normal nowadays. And then February was quite the same at 11,000. And what happened is that when spring comes, we see the active listings start to climb. In April was whopping 18,088. Usually a healthy market is about 10,000. Sometimes you can even reach as low as 8,000 and 9,000 during, let's say, 2019. At 1,800 is already pretty high. high considering that. And then in May, we active listing climbed above 20,000, which is quite a lot to be honest. So that is when you see most of the sellers trying to bet on the spring market to get their property sold. And as a result, many sellers came to the market, and that's why you see so much active listing. And it went even higher during the summer. June at 23,000. We have July similar 23,000, and it came down just a tad bit in August at 22,000, which is still high. And then more sellers came back to the market hoping the second hottest season in the real estate. So as a result, we saw the peak at 25,000 active listing on the fall market. The last time we saw over 20,000 of active listings was back in 2008 when the financial crisis happened, and we are now really comparing the active listing to that level in 2008, which is quite high, and that carried over basically in October and November. So the main takeaway is that the sold property wasn't selling much. That is the main problem we're having. Because of the amount of active listing and the less amount of sold properties, that create a huge gap in between. As you can see, each month the number of sold property compared to active listing is more than half. Most of the healthy or normal real estate market, usually the active listing is just a little bit of more of the sold property, so the absorption rate is kind of healthy and matches the balanced market or more towards the seller. But obviously right now, look at this huge gap. We're talking about in November 5,875 sold, and we have 21,000 of active listings. So this huge gap creates huge opportunity for the buyer, obviously, because they have plenty of property to choose from. So there is really no reason why you will be competing in the multiple offers. I understand some cases where some buyer wanted to get into that specific area, so it is really location dependent where you want to get in. Sometimes might not have that much inventory, but at the same time, I don't want people to be hyping because of the media telling you that this month there was a huge improvement in sales, 40%, but they are comparing to the data in 2023, same month in November. The media is hyping the sales jump 40%, but in reality, the sold property versus the active listing, the gap is huge. It means that the buyer has more leverage. So you don't have to rush in to be competing. You will probably have a lot of choices. So be careful on that. And that's the reason why when I mentioned earlier that although we have a huge increase in sales activity, it doesn't mean that everybody is starting to get into the market because of that. Just simply looking at the ratio of sales to listings, the buyers have the edge. So now let's quickly take a look at the month of inventory in November of 2024 for the entire GTA that we cover: Toronto, York, Peel, Durham, and Houghton. We have the number of sales and we have the number of active listings, which means everything that is available on the market. On the far right, we have the month of inventory. So basically, month of inventory is calculated by the active listings divided by the number of sales, and that gives you the month of inventory, which means in this case, like Toronto, they have a 3.9 month of inventory. On their normal real estate market, it will only take about 4 months to deplete all the active listing, assuming there are no new listing coming to the market. So in general, anything less than 4 will be considered as a seller's market. In context, like during the 2022, the peak, we have seen month of inventory as low as almost less than 1 month of inventory. So that is really a competitive market where property were selling like hotcakes. Between 4 to 6, in general, they consider as a balanced market. So there are really no favor to the sellers or the buyers. And then anything above 5 or 6 months of inventory, that basically reaches the buyer's market. So now let's take a look here. We have Toronto. They have the highest sales count, but at the same time, they have one of the highest active listing on the market, which give you a 4, which sitting around balanced market. However, it really comes down to local specific markets. Sometimes some markets are higher than 4, sometimes it's lower than 4. So, but this is an average. Don't assume that every market is 4 months of inventory. It's really location dependent. So at York, we have 1,087 with 4,023 active listings that give you a 3.7. So yes, closer to 4, more of a balanced market. And then Peel, we have 964 sales and 3,965 active listings. So this is the highest at 4.1. 1, and Durham are doing a little bit better than most, which they have 739 sales but only 1,817. That leaves us to 2.5, which actually fall under the seller's market, so Durham could be a little bit more competitive because there are less inventory. Houghton is at 625 sales and 2,382 active listings. That leaves us to 3.8. So for the most part, you will see more or less balance, but to me as an active agent, I think the buyers have more onto the edge. But assuming right now the rate cut is coming, more buyers that were sitting on the sideline might come on. It will be interesting to see how the activity and how's the absorption of the inventory moving forward in 2025, especially on the spring market of 2025. I hope this update provides you with a clearer understanding of the current state of the real estate market in the GTA. The past few years have been challenging, marked by high inflation, aggressive interest rate hikes in 2022, and a somewhat rapid shift to rate cuts in 2024. These changes coincided with the record year for immigration, followed by a slowdown in immigration. A lot has transpired leading us to the current phase of the rate cuts. However, it's important to recognize that a cycle of rate cuts often signals underlying economic challenges, as such measures are typically implemented in response to economic downturns. I'd like to end this video on a positive note. For those struggling with mortgage expenses or finding it difficult to sell their homes, the current rate cycle could finally bring some relief and lead to positive outcomes, particularly as we approach the spring of 2025. Depending on when this video is released, I want to wish you a happy holidays and a joyful new year, wishing health, happiness, and prosperity to all my viewers. I'll see you in 2025.